Hey guys, I wanted to do a video on the state of cold outbound email. The conversation I'm having with clients pretty much since late 2023, mid 2023, so about a year ago, are really about okay, what are the alternatives to cold outbound because it just doesn't work anymore the way it used to. And there's obviously a few reasons for that, which I'd like to discuss. But first, some context. So this is the agency that I used to run called Coldfire. You can see I've taken it offline by the URL here. It's just on a staging site. And yeah, I had fun with this agency. I learned a ton and had a lot of fun working with companies and made them some money, but ultimately decided to ramp it down and ultimately take it offline. I haven't really closed it down yet, but I'm definitely not taking on new clients. And yeah, I wanted to talk about why and how I'm currently using all the knowledge that I acquired in the period running the agency in my existing sort of client consulting practice, which is much more about revenue operations and going to market strategy in general. The short answer is there is definitely still room for cold outbound, but the big caveat is that you have to be really careful and very dialed in and know what you're doing. And that really applies to the three main components of a successful outbound campaign, which I want to talk about. So the first one is the technology setup. Obviously, you're not emailing from your own domain name, you're emailing from something that we call shield domains. And these should be legit, they should be owned by you, and the people sending out emails from those domain names should really exist. That's all table stakes right now. Like if you're messing around with like AI avatars and sort of personas that don't exist and fake LinkedIn profiles, I've never done that. I don't believe in that. And yeah, I think especially today, there's absolutely no chance that's basically working in a sophisticated sales motion. Meaning you're selling a pretty complex product of, let's say, $25,000-$30,000 and up per year. Yeah, if you're playing games like that, it's just not worth it. So that's one. Further on the tech setup, you have to make sure the email domains are kept warm on an ongoing basis, unless you are really dialed into the volume of the campaign that goes out. The spam detection on both Google infrastructure and as well Microsoft, which between the two of them probably run more than 80% of of the companies you would want to target in the West, let's say, especially in America. They've gotten very good. So anti-spam systems have started to leverage the power of AI, which has made cold outbound, is one of the big reasons has made cold outbound really, really challenging. So in terms of the technical setup, that just means you want to be able to deliver the email to the intended prospect. And there's tons of software for that. I'm not going to talk about that. There's so many videos on YouTube about what you can use. But the tech setup behind the scenes and really thinking about, does this email and domain and how long has it been alive or acquired by you, and how long has it been warming up with test messaging and sequences, and how are the tech setup how was the tech setup done? All these questions are really important in 2024 to make sure that your email even has a chance of arriving in the desired inbox and not get flagged down by spam, or worse, blacklist your domain. So that's the tech setup. Then the second part is obviously the list that you're gonna send it out to. Like, who is the cohort? Who is your avatar or your ICP, your ideal customer profile? Now here again there's a big change that has happened in the past year and a half, 2 years, I want to say, maybe even 3 years ago. It started with the rise of very low cost, public email databases. One of the more well-known ones would be Apollo. And Apollo essentially, I think for now $100 a month can give you, a decent amount of email addresses of pretty much anyone in the world. And the result of this reduction in cost on behalf of just having access to all those email addresses means that everyone has access to it, and obviously people's inboxes have been flooded with spam. And this just has made people very, very suspicious of any email coming into their inbox that is not from a close relative, colleague, or family friend. And combine that with the tighter technology sort of firewall systems that we just discussed, you now have two increases in incline of difficulty, if you want to say that, when it comes to cold outbound. So you can find anyone's email address. That's not really difficult. The question is, have they rotated out of it? Have they gotten a new email address as a result of all of this, spam that people are now receiving? So you need to really double, if not triple, verify their email. And second, are you able to get together a list of people that are close enough a resemblance of the actual decision maker that would be potentially interested in buying your service or product? And so, getting a list with 1,000 emails is very easy. Getting a list of 1,000 emails of people that are exactly your buying persona, really experience one of the 1, 2, 3 pain points that you help solve, that's very, very difficult. And again, because of the democratization, and the unlimited access to these databases, you've got LinkedIn Sales Navigator, you've got Apollo, you've got Zoom Info, and you've got 150 or 200 others. Pretty much all the same. Really make every list pretty generic, to be honest. And there's very few cohorts or sub industries that have not been subject to a massive increase in unwanted, unrequested email, or as they say, spam email. So then the third bucket you can control heavily, and I think this is the most important one, and it's always the one I focused on the most when I ran the agency and when I still build cold outbound campaigns, is essentially the copywriting, right? So this is the only really creative part in the whole formula of sending automated emails to a targeted cohort. And it's really the main one to differentiate yourself. So again, in 2024, I would say very few what we call scripts in the industry or sort of outbound copy are working, right? Once a certain script works well and someone posts it online, it gets out and everyone copies it, and then the arbitrage is gone. The leverage is immediately gone. So it's a constant game of figuring out new, clever, genuine, yet still salesy ways of hooking people, of capturing people's attention and standing out from the crowd when it comes to, their inbox. And that starts with obviously the subject line, and then the first two sentences, which are usually visible in the email client, are very important. Again, table stakes are now, since many years, if there's even a space in the wrong place in the subject line or in the first two sentences, which are visible even without opening the email, you're done, right? Like if it's hi John and then space and then comma, you're done, right? If it's hi John misspelled, you're done. So that's if you get past the spam filters, that's a big if. Now, the next filter really is the human filter, which is actually very sophisticated, and people are very well trained in detecting unwanted messaging. Now, the only really way to get through successfully is obviously, and it has always been this way, but now it's just more important than ever because it's so difficult, is to get your outbound message as close to a genuinely real organic message, right? Like it's kind of obvious, but that is the only way to stand out. And that just means no fluff. It has to be short. Nobody writes long kind of messages because they want to, even within companies, even among colleagues. You don't do that. It's quick, it's to the point. Usually I'm talking about, day-to-day update emails. I'm not talking about long sort of newsletter and company-wide town hall debriefs. But day-to-day communications, especially among executives, decision makers, people in positions of power within the organization, have very low tolerances for a lot of fluff. And so you have to balance pretty much two things. I think about it in this way. You have to balance two things ultimately. There's a lot of nuance to this and details, but ultimately you want to balance being to the point, which means short, and then earning trust, which means you need a bit more context and you often have to be a bit more, lengthy, or elaborate further on who you are and why it is you're reaching out. So those two things are at conflict. There's a tension there because you need to earn trust, but it has to be short enough. If you open up an email and you see it's this massive text, excuse me, of a person you've never heard, then obviously you're going to skip and press the spam button. So I think copywriting as the third sort of wheel to this formula of cold outbound is by and far the one you can control the most and have, the biggest impact on. And it also requires the most experience to really get good at, because writing is really a skill, especially like sales copywriting. And so, if you're interested in that, feel free to jump on a call. I'm happy to give some pointers there. The clients I work with, as I said at the beginning, in my current RevOps and HubSpot consulting, are still very interested in copywriting, and rightly so. And I help them with that, not only in outbound, but also in various content motions. So, getting your product out there in the written format is extremely important. This starts with your landing page, your hero, all the way down. But when we contain this to, let's say, an outbound email motion, making sure that what it is you say is relevant to the right person at the right time is extremely important. And so, if you talk about SaaS products, there's a lot of analytics these days within the tools themselves that can track whether somebody performs a certain action or has a certain behavior that we can then use as a trigger to follow up on that with email sequences or drip campaigns. And even there, I'm not talking about e-commerce, sort of like D2C, which is more newsletter, kind of like, here's a pair of Nike shoes, please buy them. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about more B2B, professionals that want to really hear from someone on the vendor side when there's a problem, and ideally just before that, just prior to that, how you as a company selling to them or has them as a client can help them alleviate that pain in the right moment. And you can communicate that often only through email, because calling everyone all the time doesn't really work, especially not if they're a client, unless you have them in a Slack group or community or something. But email remains a very, very powerful tool. But because it's so noisy, you have to really stand out and really know what it is you're going to write down, and respect and appreciate someone's time and attention span, because you're competing with the rest of the world, basically. So that's the conclusion. I think there's still room for outbound, but it has to be very well researched, very well put together technically. The lists have to be super clean and double, triple verified with tools that are perhaps less well known than the Apollos of this world. And then thirdly, as I said, the copywriting, it has to just be kind of like world class. Like, you have to really hook them with something creative, know what time of day and where in the week to send the email. And then the follow-up sequence, like how often do you keep bugging them basically, and how do you bug them? If you say, hey, as a second email 3 days later, did you get my first email? That is really fucking annoying. Like, that never works. Like, all the losing sort of campaigns use that strategy. I would highly advise against it. Don't ask people whether they saw it. First of all, you can usually see whether they opened it or not in your tool, which I also recommend probably turning off, because you don't want all that extra code, hanging at the bottom of your email. It's a big yellow flag, if not a red flag, for all of the spam filters. So better not to know whether they opened the email. It's not that valuable anyway. Open rates are overrated, I think. What is really important is people reply to you, and ideally reply positively, right? So that's the ultimate metric that you should go off when it comes to outbound marketing. And I would be in favor of an outbound campaign. Ideally, if you find some sort of product market fit. If you haven't, I would advise against it, because you're going to be labeled and seen as spam. You just don't have the social proof. You don't have the street credibility to punch through the noise in the inbox. So anyway, that's my sort of rant on outbound email in 2024. If you disagree, if you agree, let me know. And if you need any help with RevOps, HubSpot, or go-to-market as a more holistic sort of B2B strategy, feel free to book a call. And see you in the next one.